Can I say, first of all, welcome to Tabley House and the Tabley House Collection. And first of all, very many great thanks to Art UK for being able to showcase and give everybody a really good idea of what the Tabley House Collection is about. I'm going to be concentrating really on how it was built up, how the Tabley House Collection is the work of one man, Sir John Fleming Leicester, who became the first Lord de Tabley. But a little bit about where we are. Tabley House is in Cheshire, near Knutsford, just off junction 19 of the M6. The collection is now owned by the University of Manchester, but it was built up over the years by the Leicester family, and they became Lords de Tabley in the 19th century. The house that you can see in front of you was built in the 1760s by Sir John Fleming Leicester's father, Sir Peter Byrne Leicester. And it is designed by John Carr of York, and it is a very absolutely standard Palladian house. The centre block for the family and the symmetrical wings on each side for the services. This was told everybody that you were at the headquarters house of a large landed estate. As I said, the art collection was largely built up by Sir Peter's son at the turn of the 18th, 19th century. The two real significant points about the house collection, about Tabley House Collection, is that it showcases Regency British painting. It is a British painting collection. It doesn't contain foreign old masters. And it is surrounded by the furniture and the furnishings that make up the totality of the Tabley House collection. You are seeing the paintings in the settings for which they were commissioned, rather than in gallery white space. And I think that is, shall we say, the most important thing about the collection. But we need to concentrate on the man who was behind it all. And here he is, Sir John Fleming Leicester, 1762 to 1827. And it was painted in, or either in 1790 for part of it, and in 1826. But a little bit more about the man himself before we start looking at the painting. First to say that we have no portraits of Sir John as a private gentleman. He's usually in the uniform of either the Cheshire Militia or in the uniform of the yeomanry, the Cheshire Yeomanry, or here in his peer's robes. He inherited in 1770 at the age of 7½, and he took over the estate when he returned from his grand tour in 1786. His estate brought him in between £12,000 and £14,000 a year. Now, to return to this portrait, completed at the end of his life, after he'd been raised to the peerage. You'll note that it says that it's by both Reynolds and Simpson. So there's a story here. Round about 1790, Sir John sat to Joshua Reynolds, and the painting was still unfinished when Reynolds died. So it was finished off by Northcote as a sort of equestrian portrait. If you look very carefully, you can see just the outline of a horse, or the side of a horse, peering, and it would be peering over Sir John's shoulders, and Sir John would be wearing the uniform of the Cheshire Militia. move on a few years, 1826, and he is made Lord de Tabley. Now, it's within a year of his death. Made Lord de Tabley in May, June 1826. He dies in February 1827. So he sent this Northcote painting off to Lawrence's studio to, I can only phrase it, to be lordified, but with instructions to leave the head untouched. I think you can see that it is two different hands, head and body. Simpson didn't need Sir John there to complete a picture of a standard peer in his robes, and the painting, this rather mixed painting, was returned. Why did he leave these instructions? Why did he decide to do this? Well, for one thing, he's within 9 months of dying. He's been old, he's been sick for some time. He really did not want his old man's face to be the one that was, shall we say, memorialized in this important picture. So I think one can see there's a certain amount of vanity going on here. The other thing that it has to be said is that at this stage, in 1826, Sir John had more or less run out of money. He could not afford to sit for a new portrait, and he certainly couldn't afford Thomas Lawrence's prices at this stage. Sir John indeed did end his life with severe financial problems. So much so that when he died in 1827, he owed over £130,000. That's equivalent to £10 million today. The executors had to give up the London house, and they also had to sell off all the paintings that were there in the London collection. Very few paintings, in fact, were reserved and sent up to Tabley. So what is he up to during this intervening 35 odd years? He concentrated on championing British art and artists. He's a very important early patron of Turner. He supported the Royal Institution rather than the Royal Academy. He wasn't so much interested in art education, but in giving substantial support to artists by commissioning works from them. He opened his house in London so that the discerning public could come and see his collection. He invited artists to work at Tabley. He wasn't a bad artist himself, in fact. He was prepared to take part in the lithographic processes that were going on in the house, and to add his touches to things and give advice. And he attempted to sell his collection to the government in 1824 as a showcase for British art. Now, this was turned down by the government, partly because it was a sale that he was proposing, not a gift, but also because the collection did not contain foreign old masters. A British library, a British art gallery, wasn't quite what the government was wanting for a national gallery. So, what was his collection like? He inherited quite a good painting collection from his father. This painting collection did contain foreign old masters, but they disappeared over the years. We don't quite know where they got to, actually. We must do some more research on this. And John Fleming Leicester only kept his father's British paintings. And this is one of the paintings that, in fact, Sir Peter commissioned. it is, you might say, a standard view that a landowner would commission of his house in his park. There are 5 of these devises. They're not very big. There are 5 of these devises, and they show the new house, the old hall, and the setting of the park in which surrounded both buildings. And so he kept the devises, but the star of Sir Peter's collection is the picture by William Dobson of the first Lord Byron. Now, this is really one of the jewels of the Tabley House collection. The 17th century Sir Peter Leicester was very proud of his connection to John Byron. They were, in fact, brothers-in-law. They married half-sisters. He was a fervent royalist, so he gave his full support to the King's general. When Lady Byron died in 1664, she left this portrait, and also one of herself by Lely, she left this particular portrait to her brother-in-law rather than to the other side of the family. Now, some of you may recognise this picture, especially if you've been to the Black Atlantic exhibition at the Fitzwilliam in last year. And the Fitzwilliam was actually much more interested in the anonymous black servant in the left-hand corner, rather than the rather dominant-looking Cavalier General. And this is actually quite important in this particular theme of aristocratic portraits with black servants, in that it's one of the earliest portraits to show a non-royal with a black servant. There's a mittens of Charles I and his family with a black servant from about 1630. But this, shall we say, this motif of the black servant with the aristocratic owner is much more common after 1660. So this is quite an important painting for that concern. I don't know which Byron considered his most important, whether it was his horse or his servant, but it's still, and it's a very important painting. So here are 2 examples of the paintings that Sir John inherited. As I say, a patriotic family, and here we have him really with the other most important thing in his life, probably more important than his art collecting. In 1797, Sir John helped to found the Cheshire Yeomanry, and was its colonel for the last 30 years of the rest of his life. And here we have him on his charger Smoker, which was given to him by his great friend, the Prince Regent, and they are exercising their troops on the sands at Liverpool. I think it's more or less where Gormley's men are now situated, if you're thinking of the geography of it. The yeomanry was founded as a militia, really, a mounted militia for home defence at the start of the French wars. But it was used, I think, much more for internal law and order than anything else. The headquarters of the yeomanry were at Tabley. The stables were a remount depot, and the soldiers would exercise in the park. So Tabley House, in the turn of the 18th, 19th century, was actually a military, at the back, at least, a military camp. Most famously, of course, the yeomanry is known for its participation in Peterloo in 1819. Sir John was not present at Peterloo. He was unwell, And I think it must be said that subbing a yeomanry, supporting a yeomanry for 30 years, is probably more important for the problems of Sir John's finances than his patronage of art, or his liking for very young girls. And certainly it was a very expensive thing. And when he died in 1827, as I say, he owed so much money. And I think the responsibility lies with the yeomanry rather than with anything else. But it's important, that's important. The support for the yeomanry led to Sir John's virtual bankruptcy, which led to the sale of the London house and the dispersal of the Tabley collection, the original Tabley collection. And at the same time as he was running the yeomanry at the back of the house, at the front of the house, there was the park where he was inviting the artists to come and stay. In 1808, Sir John invited Turner and some other artists to come and spend the summer at Tabley. And this is the result, really, of Turner's involvement here. Tabley, windy day. As you can see, Turner has attempted to try and get the most romantic view possible of the Tabley Park, in that he went to the other side of the Tabley Mere and painted the view back towards the house, with the Folly, the tower, in the foreground, and a lively scene of ships on the mere. Sir John was very proud of his mere. He'd had it created in the 1790s. He's built the tower, and there is in fact a survey of the mere done in about 1816, in which all parts of the mere have got little names that are relating to English history or the events of the day. There's Aboukir Bay, Botany Bay, the Downs, the Channel. And it's clear that Sir John enjoyed sailing around. You notice that the main ship, the central ship, is flying the red ensign. Now, as colonel of the yeomanry, Sir John was equivalent in rank to an admiral of the red. So he is, shall we say, flying his colours as well as everything else. And Turner has gone and noticed it and put it in. When artists came to Tabley, they were often asked to do a painting of the mere and the tower. Henry Thompson, who came in 1808, was a not infrequent visitor. And he got asked twice to do the job. And this is, shall we say, two of the pictures. Now, the one on the left, 1812, is a fairly typical pastoral scene, but the one on the right shows Tabley at the tower at night. I have a feeling that Thompson got a little fed up at being asked to do the tower and the mere. Not surprisingly so, considering that Turner had done it well anyway. So here we have Thompson's attempt to try and vary his thank you gifts to Sir John. Now, Thompson was asked to go up to Tabley in 1810 to take down all the pictures of Sir John's longtime mistress, Emily Sinclair. She had been painted numerous times in various states of dress and undress, and Sir John wanted to have them out of the way. He pensioned Emily Sinclair off very generously, but he was getting married. At the age of 48, he finally was getting married. He did need to have legitimate children. And the girl he chose was Georgiana Cottin. Now, Georgiana Cottin was the granddaughter of William Chambers. Her mother, Lavinia Chambers, married an army officer of Huguenot extraction called Colonel Cottin. They had a grace and favour residence in Hampton Court and no money. However, Georgiana was the Prince Regent's goddaughter, and so a marriage was arranged between the young Georgiana, who's only 16, and Sir John. And these two portraits were done within a couple of years of each other. The one on the left is by William Owen, is a very typical marriage portrait. There she is, nice white dress. She's taken off her hat because she's actually coming into Tabley Park. On the horizon, those of you who know Cheshire will be able to recognise Shuttlingslow. So she's walking into her new home. Now, this is a painting that has always hung at Tabley, and it was always meant to hang at Tabley. And it's a straightforward, standard marriage portrait. The one on the right has got more to it. It's by Lawrence. It's one of Lawrence's best performances. And it shows Georgiana as Hope. So she is here as an allegorical figure, Hope. And this particular painting was meant to hang in the London gallery. And this is the difference between the two parts of Sir John's collection. Tabley had the family portraits, had landscapes. London had allegorical figures, high art in the Reynolds sense. They were one complete collection. When William Carey published the catalogue of the collection in 1819, both the rooms at the London House and the rooms at and the Tabley Gallery are included in the same publication. They are one collection, but they have got different characters. And this is the picture gallery in London, on the corner of Hill Street and Berkeley Square. So you can't get any better, really, as far as a townhouse was concerned. You'll notice that the overhead lighting means that there is more hanging space for the pictures. And you'll also notice that at the far end there is a curtained alcove. And that was where Sir John hung his star picture, which was Gainsborough's cottage door. Now, the important thing about the picture gallery in London was that Sir John opened it to the public. He didn't open it to just anyone, and he made it very clear that he didn't want his picture gallery to become, as he phrased it, a fashionable lounge. He wanted to keep it to discerning people who really could understand art and could benefit from looking at his collection of British art. Thomas Hayden was working for Leicester at this time, and he brought his friend John Keats to come and see the gallery. It has to be said that Keats loved the pictures, but didn't take to Sir John. Now, it's this collection that was sold, or this part of the collection that was sold, and very few pieces were reserved to come up to Tabley. One of them was Georgiana. There you can see her in the background in the Tabley Gallery. And this is really what Sir John created up here in Cheshire in order to show off his pictures here. Originally 3 rooms, but converted into one large room running the whole depth of the west side of the house. And the architect come engineer was Thomas Harrison of Chester, who certainly knew how to do an arch. And you needed to have a good engineer because, in fact, the arches took out the fireplace walls, which supported the whole building, took out the fireplace walls to create this big through room. The ceiling was clouded in 1813, but the rest of the decor really dates from a generation later, from the 1840s. And as a room, it is a very fine showcase for some of the masters of our collection, some of the masterpieces. You'll notice, as I say, Georgiana at the far end of the fireplace. And you might also notice this picture here. Here's a close-up of it. This is The Fall of Phaeton by James Ward. Now, this particular painting originally hung in London, and it was bought back by the family, by the second Lord de Tabley, in the 19th century, when it came onto the London market. He bought back The Fall of Phaeton. He also bought back another painting, the Fuseli painting of Friar Puck. I've chosen to show the Ward because I think Ward is underestimated. He's sort of dismissed as an animal painter. And although these feature horses, very obviously, the whole way in which this painting is put together, from the terrified horse at the bottom and then following the red traces up to the figure of Phaeton falling at the top, I think is very well put together. He is much more than just an animal painting. As I said, this particular painting was here and was brought back into the collection. The last major painting that Sir John commissioned was the destruction of Herculaneum in Pompeii by John Martin. Commissioned in 1824, it's the second version of the painting. The prime version is in the Tate. It was very large and very badly damaged in the 1827 flood. But then, come the 2008 Martin exhibition, they hauled it out of the storeroom and used our painting to help them restore the original. What they discovered in the original actually is there are differences between this smaller version and the larger prime version. Martin's original version is a much more educational piece, and it came with a numbered chart so that you could identify the people involved. Come the painting for Sir John, I think it would be fair to say that Sir John didn't need educating in classical literature or classical history. And so you have a much more, shall we say, generalized picture, sort of saying that why save your wealth when you're going to lose your life? With doomed figures who are being destroyed by Vesuvius, who's having one heck of a time up above. This is the last painting that, last big painting that he commissioned. It shows that he's still at the forefront of artistic taste, even towards the end of his life. We also find him in 1824, he tries to sell his whole collection to the nation. Doesn't come off. But we also find him trying to drum up support for the Royal Manchester Institution. And we find him approving of the choice of the young Charles Barry as the architect for the Royal Manchester Institution, which is now Manchester Art Gallery. So we find him involved in things right the way through towards the end of his life. But he is bankrupt. And come the end of, come the beginning of 1827, he dies. The London house, the lease is given up, and the contents of the London house are sold. And we are left with the Tabley House Collection in Tabley House. So I will in fact say goodbye. Thank you very much for joining me for this this afternoon, and I do hope that I'll see some of you at Tabley. I think that's about it. So I'll check through to the